This is Toronto. Today, 2.9 million people live inside the city limits. 6.2 million call the Greater Toronto Area home. It is the undisputed financial capital of Canada and the most ethnically diverse city on the face of the earth. No single ethnic group makes up more than half the population. Half of all Torontonians were born outside Canada. More than 200 languages are spoken on its streets every single day. Yet this extraordinary metropolis stands on a lakeshore that humans have called home for 12,000 unbroken years. This is the story of how it happened. From the first campfire lit after the glaciers retreated to the most multicultural city humanity has ever built. It all begins with the water. Lake Ontario, the sixth largest lake in North America, an inland sea so vast that on a clear day you still cannot see the American shore from Toronto's waterfront. The natural harbor created by the curving arm of the Toronto Islands made this precise spot on the northern shoreline inevitable. For 12,000 years, people have stood here, looked out across that water, fished its depths, and built their lives beside it. The geography itself dictated the city's destiny long before any Europeans set foot on the shore. 10,000 years before Christ, the glaciers that had buried this land for millennia finally retreated northward. They left behind a flat, sandy till plain, the very ground Toronto sits on today, and a cold, clear lake. The first humans followed the retreating ice, tracking caribou northward. They lit their first fires on the shoreline, fished the abundant waters of the Don and Humber rivers, and stayed. The Anishinaabe, the original people, returned season after season to these river mouths for fishing and trade. Birch bark wigwams rose on the beaches, canoes were pulled ashore, and nets dried in the summer sun. The lake gave them everything they needed. They cleared fields and grew the Three Sisters, corn, beans, and squash, in a sophisticated agricultural system that fed communities of thousands. They maintained vast trade networks stretching from the Atlantic to the Mississippi. The Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Five Nations, controlled the region for much of the 17th and 18th centuries, their council fires and wampum belts recording treaties and a philosophy of coexistence captured in the two-row wampum. At the heart of it all was the Toronto Carrying Place Trail, the most important overland trade route in northeastern North America. It began at the mouth of the Humber River, followed the river north to Lake Simcoe, then continued to Georgian Bay and the entire Great Lakes system beyond. Generations of Indigenous traders walked this path carrying furs, copper, shells, tobacco, and dried fish. It made this location the indispensable crossroads of the continent. Every European who later arrived did so because Indigenous peoples had already understood and named this landscape strategic power. In 1615, the French interpreter Etienne Brule became possibly the first European to glimpse the future site of Toronto. He was guided along the Carrying Place Trail by Huron-Wendat companions who knew every step of the route. By 1750, the French had built the modest Fort Rouy on the shore, a small wooden trading post designed to capture the fur trade. Mississauga traders arrived by canoe with beaver pelts. French goods flowed the other way. The economics of colonialism had arrived. In 1787, the British signed the Toronto Purchase with a Mississauga Anishinaabe. The British understood it as an outright sale of land. The Mississauga understood it as a sharing agreement. The treaty's vague boundaries were contested from the beginning and remain contested today. In 2010, the Mississauga of the New Credit First Nation received a $145 million settlement. The land question at Toronto's founding is still being answered. On July 30th, 1793, Lieutenant Governor John Graves, Simcoe, stepped ashore and declared this swampy, malarial spot the new capital of Upper Canada. He named it York. Almost everyone thought he was mad. Yet Simcoe saw a future city where others saw only mud and mosquitoes. Fort York rose quickly from logs and determination. Loyalist settlers began arriving. By 1800, the population was roughly 400. King Street was a rutted mud track. This was the capital of a vast province, yet looked more like a frontier outpost. The ambition was wildly disproportionate to the reality, and that same disproportionate ambition would define Toronto for the next 2 centuries. In April 1813, during the War of 1812, American forces attacked. The British garrison retreated after detonating the fort's powder magazine in a massive explosion. The invaders burned the Parliament buildings. York was occupied and left in ashes, but the town rebuilt again. After the war, brick and frame buildings replaced log ones. British veterans arrived seeking opportunity. By the 1820s, the population had grown to 700. The family compact controlled the appointed councils and land grants. They clashed bitterly with reformer William Lyon Mackenzie. In December 1837, Mackenzie led roughly 800 farmers and reformers down Yonge Street in the Upper Canada Rebellion. The uprising collapsed in minutes, but its demands for responsible government were ultimately granted by Britain in 1849. On March 6, 1834, the town of York was officially incorporated as the City of Toronto, reclaiming its Indigenous name at last. William Lyon Mackenzie became its first mayor. 9,000 people now lived here. The steam railway arrived in 1853, following the ancient route of the Toronto Carrying Place Trail. The same geography, different technology. Toronto became the commercial gateway to the interior of the continent. Victorian Toronto boomed. By 1891, the population had reached 181,000, 20 times larger in just 60 years. King Street was lined with ornate commercial buildings, horse-drawn streetcars, and Timothy Eaton's flagship store. The city proudly called itself Toronto the Good, Protestant, orderly, and deeply convinced of its own righteousness. Yet Irish famine refugees of the 1840s arrived in coffin ships and settled in Cabbagetown, building the physical city even as Protestant Toronto viewed Catholic Irish with suspicion and hostility. Newcomers built the city that was not always glad to see them. That pattern would repeat again and again. The waterfront hummed with commerce. The Gooderham and Wirtz distillery, the largest in the British Empire, employed hundreds. In 1899, the magnificent Old City Hall rose in Richardson Romanesque splendor. The University of Toronto grew into a center of learning that would eventually rank among the world's finest institutions. Women fought for the vote. Emily Stowe led the way. Toronto was becoming a real city. Then came the Great Fire of 1904. On April 19th, a blaze began in a factory on Wellington Street West. By morning, 14 acres of the downtown wholesale district lay in ashes. $10 million in damage. And remarkably, not one person died. Toronto rebuilt immediately in fireproof steel and brick. The new downtown was wider, stronger, and more impressive than what the fire had consumed. The financial district that still defines the skyline today began to take shape from those ashes. The 20th century brought war, depression, and transformation. 68,000 Torontonians enlisted in the First World War. 13,000 never came home. The 1920s brought jazz and movie palaces and a city straining against its own Protestant conservatism. The Great Depression hit hard. 30% unemployment, relief lines, hobo camps in the Don Valley. World War II saw Toronto factories produce the legendary wooden mosquito bomber, while women took over the assembly lines and proved, once again, that the work could be done by whoever was given the chance. After 1945, the city exploded outward. Suburbs, North York, Scarborough, Etobicoke, sprang up almost overnight. Don Mills became Canada's first planned suburb. The real story of post-war Toronto was immigration. Hundreds of thousands of Italians arrived in the 1950s and 60s, settling on College Street and building the post-war city with their hands and their hearts. They brought espresso, gelato, and a love of food that permanently changed Toronto's culture. Portuguese and Greek communities followed, layering into Kensington Market and the Danforth. In 1968, urbanist Jane Jacobs arrived from New York and helped stop the destructive Spadina Expressway that would have torn through established neighborhoods. The CN Tower rose between 1973 and 1976, the world's tallest free-standing structure, visible from 100 miles up the lake. That same year, the Part 1 Québécois victory in Quebec sent Montreal's Anglophone businesses west along Highway 401. In 1976, Toronto surpassed Montreal as Canada's largest city, a shift that has never reversed. Caribbean immigrants brought color, rhythm, and the Caravana Festival that became the largest street festival in North America. Waves of Asian immigration in the 1980s and 90s transformed Markham and expanded Chinatown on Spadina. In 1998, 6 municipalities amalgamated into a single city of Toronto with 2.4 million people. The Distillery District rose from Victorian ruin to beloved cultural hub. SARS struck in 2003. Toronto responded with courage and a Rolling Stones concert that announced to the world the city was very much alive. The 21st century has been defined by explosive growth and new tensions. The condominium boom has filled the skyline with more cranes than any other North American city. Yet housing has become unaffordable for many of the people who built this place. The Raptors' 2019 NBA championship brought 2 million people into the streets, the most diverse victory parade in sports history. Toronto has emerged as North America's third largest tech hub. Pearson Airport remains one of the most diverse arrivals halls on Earth. Every day the world walks in and becomes Toronto. Yet the city still grapples honestly with its past and its promises. It acknowledges every official event on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Reconciliation remains unfinished work. Housing prices have crossed $1 million on average. Transit struggles to keep pace with growth. Toronto's neighborhoods still read like a world atlas. Little Italy on College, Chinatown on Spadina, Greektown on the Danforth, Little India on Gerrard, Little Jamaica on Eglin West, Koreatown on Bloor. You can eat your way around the globe without leaving the city limits. Its ravines form the largest urban green corridor in North America. University Avenue is a global medical powerhouse. Insulin was discovered here in 1921. The pacemaker pioneered here, and Sick Kids Hospital has saved children's lives on every continent. 3 truths have always defined Toronto. First, the lake, unchanged for 12,000 years, that made settlement here inevitable. Second, the civic institutions built patiently by generations who believed this place was worth investing in. Third, and most powerfully, the people, half born outside Canada, people who arrived with nothing and built everything. Toronto has burned down, been humiliated in war, survived depression and pandemic, and kept rebuilding, each time better, bigger, more inclusive than before. From a muddy colonial outpost of 400 souls to nearly 3 million lights glowing at night on the shore of the lake that started everything, it has never stopped becoming. Toronto, where there are trees standing in the water, remains its original name. The city that grew from it now belongs to everyone who came here and decided to stay. Toronto tonight. Still here, still becoming.